With Travis Hunter coming into focus for the Browns, people seem to want to make him specialize in one position or the other. I don't think he has to. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. How realistic is it for Travis Hunter to play both ways? Also, the Browns get some major news regarding their stadium plans, and Deshaun Watson still believes. Nobody else seems to, though. I do want to thank you for being here every day at the Locked On Browns podcast, making this your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well, and it's totally free to you. All you got to do, hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, and, of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. Tomorrow is a Fan Friday, so send me your questions as well at Spencito_, and we'll get those in on the show tomorrow, as we're also looking forward to having a guest tomorrow to talk about both Colorado products. Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter should be a fun one, but today's episode, in the meantime, is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And so, yes, as we get more and more deeper and deeper, I should say, into the Browns honing in, if you will, on Travis Hunter, there's been so much discussed throughout this pre-draft process with him about whether or not he needs to specialize, whether or not he needs to choose one position over the other, receiver or corner. And what's interesting is, like, this conversation with him started as he's probably more of a corner that can be part of some offensive packages. And I do agree that that's probably the easier way to get him involved. It's easier, I think, to start somebody out as a corner and then say, hey, we have a 20-play package that includes you as part of the offense, and you'll come out and you'll run these certain plays. You kind of have a sense of, like, okay, here's the 20 plays. Here's what I do on all these plays. You don't have to learn like two different things completely. But the Browns, and this is what makes it interesting, have been pretty clear that they view Travis Hunter more so as a wide receiver. Wide receiver is also the bigger need for this team. I know some people would probably throw out there and say corner is a need, especially the way Martin Emerson Jr. played last year. This team still feels pretty comfortable with Martin Emerson Jr. going forward. I think they just think it was a down year. They feel like he has a chance to really bounce back. And I would guess, like, he's probably somewhere in the middle of what he saw his rookie year, where he was great, and his second year, where he took a pretty big step back and sort of slipped a little bit. Where he truly exists is probably somewhere in the middle. You also have Greg Newsome in the picture still right now, and we'll get to him coming up in this conversation, because I do think there's an interesting element to this as well that involves him. But I'm not worried about Hunter attempting to play both ways if he wants to. And he has said he wants to. And I think if you're taking him anywhere, but especially number 2 overall, you have to find a way to use him on both sides of the ball in some capacity. Whether that is you make him a corner who comes in and has a package on offense, or whatever it might be. It just feels like there has to be a world where you maximize him being involved in on both sides, however you want that to look. So if the Browns view him as a wide receiver, there needs to be a way where they include him on defense in some way, shape, or form, because he's just too valuable not to. And I understand, like, the concerns that come with that. There's injury concerns. And one of the things that has been said about Hunter is he's a little more slight as a player. He only weighed 175 in college. At the combine, he weighed 185. So he was a little bit more, there was a little bit more to him. But like Denzel Ward, for example, plays at like, the 190s, and we continually have conversations about him and the concussions and if he plays too slight, if you will. So I think with Hunter, that same conversation sort of exists, but there's not really a long injury history with him. He has seemed to be okay playing at that weight, and I'm sure he will put on a little bit of weight when he gets to the NFL level. But I still think the athleticism that he shows and displays is on full display. Like, you can't waste that on just one side of the ball and limit the potential of him. And if you're drafting him that high, you'd be silly not to. Now, I know the thing people have brought up is this idea of, like, how is he going to jump between rooms? Like, how is he going to go study the film and get involved in the defensive packages under Jim Schwartz, and then have to like one day leave that room and go to the wide receiver meetings instead? And how will coaches feel about that? Guys, I just can't. He's been doing this for a while now, right? And I understand like meetings for position groups in high school is different than meetings in college, and then college is different than the NFL. And specializing is generally the way of the way football's gone, obviously for decades now. It used to be that you could play both ways. Now that's not so much a thing that you see anymore. And so that's why it makes him such a rare player in that regard. But I'm not worried about him like having to learn multiple things or like that. That doesn't seem like a problem that should exist with the team from the team standpoint. The team should put him in position to be successful on both sides of the ball and include him however they see fit. It is ultimately on him. If he thinks he can play both ways, and he's been doing it to this point in his career, his football career, if he thinks he can play both ways, I don't see, like, to me, it's on him to sort of make sure he's dotting his I's and crossing his T's when it comes to understanding the nuances of everything he has to do, or he's being asked to do rather, by a defensive coordinator or a defensive coach or a defensive position coach or an offensive coordinator and an offensive position coach. Like, that's a challenge for him, but he has never shied away from the fact that he can do that. Like, he has said continually, I want to play both ways. I can do this. I know I can. I want to transcend the game in that way. And if that's what he wants to do, if he thinks he's up for that challenge, I think you give him a shot to do that. You don't worry about the logistics of like, well, I don't want to pull him out of corner meetings. And there are some technical things that he needs to work on, I think, on both sides of the ball, because I think at this point he has been able to get away with the fact that like he's just a freak athlete. And so he hasn't had to learn every single technical detail to have success. And at the NFL level, it's different. Everyone's faster. Everyone's quicker. Everyone closes space a lot sooner. Like there's more challenges that come with it. So he's going to have to learn some more of those technical things. And once he adds those to his game, whether it's corner, whether it's receiver, I can just imagine the sky is the limit for him. And so, yes, like he'll have to sort of maybe rotate in meetings and do different things on different days. But again, that's a challenge for him to figure out. And I expect that he would be able to do it. I'm not sitting here saying you shouldn't, not that you shouldn't take him, but I'm not sitting here worried about like once you get him in the room, like how do you utilize him? Now, on some level, the Browns do have to figure out like what's best, like what's one's the best for him to maybe specialize in maybe more, because I do think he'll specialize in one over the other. And again, it's they complicate it a little bit by making that position maybe receiver over corner, because there's not like you don't really get like packages. Well, I mean, there are packages on defense, dime, nickel, whatever. But I'm saying there's not really like a Travis Hunter package that you can throw out there and put him out there. You'd have to just kind of have him in spots play. And that's where I think Greg Newsome comes into focus here, because I think they should try to trade Greg Newsome. It sounds like they've at least had some conversations about that, both of the last 2 years, really. And I think maybe nickel would be the perfect place for him to play. You're in nickel a lot, but he can rotate in and out with somebody like Cameron Mitchell. And maybe that's like the perfect spot where, he doesn't have to be on the field all the time as like an outside guy. And because if he's like your number one corner, you want him out there as much as possible. Like Denzel Ward is a guy you want out there every single snap. Your nickel spot, you can change, you can rotate, you can do some different things if you wanted. And so that's where the nickel spot sort of feels like the maybe natural place he would play if you were going to make him prioritize receiver and then work in on defense at times. So that's where the Greg Newsome sort of thing comes into play. Because right now, the Browns have three guys they like starting at those three positions. The two outside guys, you got Ward, you got Emerson, and you got in the nickel spot, Greg Newsome. Greg Newsome is the one guy you can trade and get $13 million off the books without having to worry about any dead money, not having to worry about any like voided year money that accelerates onto the cap this year. So like it clearing space for somebody like Hunter to play that role, I think makes some sense. Now maybe you don't want him to play in the inside spot because that's not like where the premier corners play, but it just feels like that could be an easy way to sort of integrate him into being able to do what he says he wants to do, which is play obviously both sides of the ball. Now that complicates things a little bit. I don't know what the future holds for Newsome. It doesn't sound like a trade is imminent at this moment, but that obviously could change here in the coming weeks. Who knows, like over the course of the next year. I don't think they're going to give him a new contract. I think he's either going to play this year out on his last year with the Browns, or they're going to try to trade him before the season starts or before the deadline or whatever it might be. But this is an interesting situation. But I'll say this, if you consider it like a quote unquote, I don't consider it a problem, but if you frame it that way, it's a good problem to have a player who can do multiple things. And you got to sort of figure out what meetings he's going to be in on certain days and weeks and how to best deploy him on any given Sunday or any given game. I think that's okay. The Browns will work through those things. Travis Hunter will work through those things. And I'm not worried about like that not working or him having to specialize one way or another. I think the Browns, like all teams that would want to draft him, would have plans on using him on both sides of the ball. And it's not something that like deters me from thinking like it's not going to work or this isn't a good thing. Like, no, I view it as a positive pretty much from all angles. The Browns got a major new update and some major news regarding their stadium plans in Brook Park from the state. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. There's nothing like feeling the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup. Finding great seats at great prices, that used to be a challenge until I found Gametime. Last year, I used Gametime for the first time when I bought tickets to see Ohio State, Michigan. Yes, it was a disappointing result, as you can imagine, but I get to say I saw the national championship Buckeyes in person last year, and now Gametime is my go-to app for buying tickets. In fact, I just bought tickets to a concert later this fall for my wife's birthday. We're really excited about that experience coming on down the pike here as well. Gametime makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer, and with their all-in pricing, you see the total cost up front, no surprises at checkout. Last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. The lowest price is guaranteed means I never have to worry about overpaying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so as the Browns continue their process of figuring out what their new stadium situation is going to look like, and we know their proposal involves building the Dome Stadium in Brook Park, fans very aware of this at this point, and there's some very important discussions and votes taking place at the state level right now, the state government level right now in Columbus, where they're trying to pass the budget for the upcoming year. And part of this involves the Browns' request for some funds from the state to help fund their stadium project in Brook Park. And so the Haslam Sports Group is seeking a 50-50 public-private split. They want to combine $1.2 billion in bonds between the state, the county, and the city of Brook Park, and they're hoping they're going to pay the rest themselves for the project that they're obviously trying to conclude for the stadium that they're trying to finish here, the $2.4 billion indoor stadium that they're trying to finish. And so the state house passed a budget on Wednesday that does include $600 million in bonds for the Browns' proposed Brook Park indoor stadium. And so that's a massive amount of money. The Browns are still trying to secure the money from they would get the money from the city because Brook Park wants it to go through. The county is the biggest holdup in terms of like the 50-50 split, the amount that they want from state issued bonds and county issued bonds and city issued bonds that they're going to pay back through the tax revenue generated from the facility that they're hoping to get. So the county is the biggest holdup because Chris Ronayne, the county executive, is saying that they don't really want to. They don't want the Browns to leave downtown Cleveland, as the city of Cleveland is also saying. And so they're sort of railroading the Browns. You know, there's a big federal case right now, or a federal lawsuit that was filed about them if they're violating the Modell law and all these different things that still has to play itself out. So that's kind of being sorted out as well. But in the meantime, this is a big step in terms of trying to get the funding that they are hoping for their stadium plan in Brook Park. And so where it goes from here, and there's also another interesting part of this that we need to get into, where it goes from here is the budget now has to go to the Senate, and the Senate will vote on it next and try to approve it next in terms of, passing it and guaranteeing that the Browns will get this $600 million in bonds, and they should have an answer to that question by late June. And so this is important because the Browns have said that they want to start breaking ground, I think early 2026, I think is when they want to start. So the idea here is, or spring of 26 maybe. So the idea here is like, if they're going to get this thing done on time and it's going to line up with the stadium, the current stadium lease expiring and then moving into their new facility by 2029, they need to start that process of like groundbreaking, starting the build, all those different things. And so there's tighter timelines now on this stuff. It was multiple years that it took to sort of get to this point of proposing the stadium plan. And now it's getting down to the nitty gritty in terms of like meeting deadlines and things that are important to them. So the Senate's approval would allow them to then get that $600 million theoretically and know they have that money secure from the state, which is a big chunk of change that would help them in being able to follow through on this project. Now, the problem here is, and there was an interesting update that sort of popped up from this vote, because in the aftermath of the budget passing in the House, there was also an amendment that was put out by State Rep Ron Ferguson, and he basically wants to amend the budget bill to disallow state funding for professional sports stadiums. And so the reason this is interesting, and I got to shout out my guy Anthony Lima on 92 The Fan for this, because he sort of pointed this out. The amendment that they're trying to add here, it was basically like a 50-50 vote. Like it just barely passed, with the nays saying they weren't going to add it, 50-49 in terms of the votes that were cast. That's a tight margin, obviously. One vote is the tightest of margins you can possibly have for a vote like that. And so as Lima pointed out in picking up that story, and I think it's important to note here as I bring it up with you on this platform, like that basically means that if Mike DeWine, governor of the state, obviously wants to, because Mike DeWine's proposal the entire time has been, I don't want to use state funds and bonds for sports stadiums for these owners. I want, what his plan was to get the money for these stadiums was he wants to increase the tax on gambling in the state to 4%, and then that money becomes what's used for the sports teams in both across the state. Browns, anybody in Columbus, anybody in Cincinnati, the Bengals, who are also going through a stadium situation of their own. Like, he wants to use the money, the tax money generated from the gambling taxes that he would increase to fund those things, and not use state funds for stadiums. And it's an understandable, I guess, stance to sort of have. Using people's tax dollars can be a dicey thing. And, the constituents of Ohio, citizens of Ohio, probably don't love that all the time. So I can understand where that perspective is coming from. So the reason that vote matters, that second vote on the amendment that was proposed matters, is that if it's a 50-50 split, basically, for that to pass, or for that not to pass, that there would be an amendment that doesn't allow state funds to go to stadiums, then that means Mike DeWine, theoretically, once the budget comes to his desk in June, if the Senate approves it, he can basically sit there, veto it, and then to override a veto from the governor, you need 2/3 of a vote. And clearly, the House isn't going to give you the 2/3 vote that's needed to have that pass. And it has to get 2/3 votes both in the House and the Senate to be overrided by the state government outside of the governor's jurisdiction, or his sort of flexing of muscles with the veto power that he has. So that's an interesting development, because if he likes his plan better, he could theoretically throw that plan out there and say, I'm vetoing this. I want you guys to vote on my plan to increase the gambling revenue, or the gambling tax, and then we'll use that money instead to help these teams. And that would throw a wrench into the Browns' plans and delay this process. And listen, it also, the Bengals ownership is watching this closely too, because if the Browns get $600 million in revenue and tax revenue from the state to help with their stadium situation, the Bengals are going to want the same thing. And plus the price tags on these stadiums go up every single second. So like, they're going to want that too. It sets a precedent that the state government will help all these entities when their stadiums come due for renovations and things like that. And so that second vote on the amendment to disallow state funds to go to stadiums is interesting, because it could point to Mike DeWine ultimately going back to his original plan, scrapping the budget that was proposed and vetoing it so that the Browns don't get that money right now. And then that might delay things a little bit further for Cleveland as they try to sort through this. And as Jimmy Haslam said at the owners' meetings last week, if they don't get the funding and they continue to get railroaded, they're ultimately just going to go back to, well, we're going to have to renovate the current stadium, which some people might be okay with that because they want the team to stay downtown, but it sets the organization back. It puts lipstick on that pig, and we're going to have this conversation again, even with a massive renovation that could take place in what, 5-10 years? Like, this all just comes back to the surface again down the line. It's a kicking the can down the road situation. At least it feels that way. So something interesting to keep an eye on if you're somebody who is pro this dome project and you want this to go through, the good news is it got approved in the House. It's a win on that front. The bad news is it could have ramifications with how this other amendment barely passed, or fail rather, that could change the way that they're going to have to try to get their funding from the state if they want to go through with this project wholeheartedly. So it's an interesting development, something to keep an eye on, and we will track it here with Locked On Browns every step of the way as more and more of this information comes to light. By the time the Browns get that new stadium in 2029, it's unlikely Deshaun Watson will be here to see it, but he's keeping the faith that he'll bounce back moving forward throughout the rest of his career. I don't know if anybody really believes him, though. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work, of taking pride in what you build and practicing every detail to get the best results. But no one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier. At Epicor, the all-stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing your whole supply chain is easier. Managing logistics is easier. Responding to price changes is easier. From small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with global visions, we'll equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way. Because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most of every hardworking minute. Epicor, or easier doesn't cut corners, easier finds the lane. Discover your success at www.easierwithepicor.com. That's www.easierwithepicor.com. All right, so the Deshaun Watson saga may be mostly over in Cleveland, and he's going to be around this year. We know that. There's no getting around that. His contract just forbids the Browns from doing anything drastic like cutting him. I know people want to cut him. It's not going to happen. And so while he's around, he's rehabbing at the team facility. He's posting social media videos about his journey back from this Achilles tear. And he's hearing what everybody is saying about him, including Jimmy Haslam, who said it was a big swing and a miss with Deshaun Watson last week. And Deshaun's taken to Instagram now multiple times over the last 2 weeks to sort of vent about how he feels about his situation right now. And it's been sort of interesting to follow. Last week, after those comments from Jimmy Haslam, he posted sort of a cryptic post. What did he say? I'm trying to remember exactly what he said. I didn't write this one down because I was going to focus more so on what he said this week. But he had some post about just like, the doubters or, people talking about him or whatever, and how he's going to prove him wrong and all these different things. And listen, I can respect the fact. Well, hold on before I get there. And then this week, as there was the piece written by ESPN just about his future in Cleveland, probably being, towards the end here, and they're going to find a way out at some point. And there was an executive in the NFC and a scout or an agent rather, who had sort of varying opinions on what his career would look like if he were to be released by the Browns. The executive in the NFC, anonymous by the way, in this piece by ESPN said that he didn't necessarily think anybody would take a swing on him anymore. Like, it'd be kind of like a risk thing. And would you be willing to do it? Is there anything left in the tank? Probably not. And then the agent said quarterbacks get forgiven for most, so somebody would take a shot because there's the potential there, and they when it's that position and it's talent involved, you always try, right? So there's varying opinions on what his career looks like whether or not this is we all kind of get the sense this is the end of his time in Cleveland this next year. But is it really the end of his career? And that's the big question. So it's unknown at this point, like what type of appetite would exist for Deshaun once he becomes a free agent. I would assume next year when the Browns release him, because I'm assuming that's what's going to happen. But as people continue to sort of doubt what his career looks like and talk about how bad he's been during his time in Cleveland, he's keeping the faith. And he went to Instagram again, posted a video this time, once again wearing Browns gear, sort of showing himself working out, documenting his recovery from the Achilles injury. And in this video, he says, everyone is doubting me. Everyone don't believe in me. Everyone don't think I can get back to where I was. But I know and I believe the work that I put in, and I believe in myself. I know I'm going to be way better than before. We've heard this rhetoric from Deshaun in the past. He's talked about, like, my goal isn't just to get back to being who I was, it's to get even better. And at this point, like, I can respect the fact that as a player, as an athlete, you're never going to doubt yourself. There's a lot of confidence and somewhat of like an ego that has to go into making it to that stage and that level of the NFL or that level of the sport anyway. So I can understand where, like, he's not doubting himself at this point. He believes he can still get back on track, turn this thing around, whatever you want to call it. And so, yeah, I can respect that. I can respect that you got to have that mentality, especially coming off of another just devastating injury that's likely to sort of derail his career here. But at the same time, like, saying it is one thing. At this point, nobody believes him. At this point, nobody believes that he will ever be that player again, Browns fans or otherwise. And so I'm not telling him not to post these things, and I'm not telling him not to, like, I just think at this point, though, like a souped up video with, cool music behind it and like slow motion walking into the gym and like doing lifts and stuff, that's not convincing anybody that all of a sudden you're going to be back. The Browns fans have done this before. We saw Odell Beckham Jr. out there making one-handed catches on practice video. We saw him on the treadmill sprinting at top speed. Like, we've seen it all with these guys. Like, those videos are cool and but to a point, right? And with Deshaun, the point here is, like, until he performs on the field, no one's going to believe that he's going to get back to that. He can say it all he wants. He can post the videos he wants. I just kind of think, like, at this point for him, moving in silence, working in silence is probably his best bet, because posting these things in response to what maybe, I'm assuming this is kind of what it was, like some of it, at least the last week, his post last week, posting these responses to the critics and posting these responses to the owner of the team you're currently playing for, it accomplishes nothing. And frankly, it just points more to the fact that as Deshaun sits there and tells everybody he blocks all this stuff out and doesn't pay attention, he's not blocking it out, and he is paying attention. And so that doesn't give anybody else, that just compounds even more. It's one of the biggest reasons people think you lost a step is that you're too in your head and you're paying too much attention to what everybody else is saying about you. And it's something that the Browns didn't account for when they traded for him. The idea that, like, mentally he might just be shot. And as you continue to respond to these things, it just proves that even more to people. And again, it's about action at this point, not just, posting cool videos of yourself trying to work back to the player that you were. Until you're on the field doing it, nobody believes it, and we don't even know if he's going to get that chance again. So I didn't want to spend a ton of time on this. I saved it for the last topic for a reason. But man, I just at this point, I just don't know if I've ever been around a player more tone deaf than Deshaun Watson in terms of, like, the way he goes about his business. And after this off the field stuff, obviously, but also, like, given everything else that's transpired since then with him, just from a player standpoint and a football standpoint, like, just move in silence, man. Just move in silence. It would do a lot better. I think it would do him more of a service to just kind of work and try to prove people wrong that way than like continue to respond to every little thing that gets said. But I don't know if I've been around a player who's been this tone deaf, maybe ever. It's kind of crazy. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound, and we got a lot more to come in the on a Friday here, a Fan Friday. If you have questions for me for Friday's episode, hit me up at Spencito_, or you can drop them in the comments section here on the Cleveland Browns or Locked On Browns, YouTube channel. I can tell you we're also going to have a guest for Friday's show, Kevin Borba, who is the host of Locked On Buffs. We're going to talk to him about Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and what both those guys bring to the table. It should be fun. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already to the Locked On Browns podcast, wherever it is that you get your podcast, and of course right here at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. We appreciate you making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Peace.